Welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Let's read the Scholomance series together. The first book in the series is A Deadly Education. In this book we get to know the main character Elle, and she is quite a loner. She goes to the Scholomance school, which is a very particular school. It's a magic school, but there are no teachers there. They have to educate themselves, and they do so because otherwise they will not survive. In this book they are constantly attacked by Maleficaria, which is shortened to mals. And these mals can take different forms. I have kind of started to think of them as Tim Burton doing Pokemon. In order to know how to defeat these mals, they have to study spells, which they can get through books. They can either get in a library or through the void. This whole school is actually built around a void, from which they can get books, or they might throw things into the void, even people. And besides spells, you can also learn how to manufacture objects that might help you. But Elle in particular is very much focusing on studying spells. Now, Elle is a loner for a reason. She has this tendency to attract very dark magic. She is prophesied to be someone who destroys a lot of the world. But she doesn't want to be this evil person. She is actually trying to work very much against it, because in this magic system you have two ways to gain power which you need to cast a spell. You either have Malia, which you can subtract from objects or living things, and the tendency for Elle would be to attract this Malia from living persons, which would of course be very bad, so she does not want to use Malia. And instead she has to use mana, which is the other option. But to get mana, you have to work in some way. So she has to do exercises, or she has to crochet, which she really hates doing. Something that goes against her will, which will provide her with mana, which she has to store in crystals. Now, Elle has a tendency to be very angry because it is in her character, and it is her safety shield to keep people away from her, because she is afraid that she might hurt them actually. But she has convinced herself that she wants to be that way. But on the other hand, she very much has to try and work together with other people, because at the end of the Scholomance, when they graduate, they have to go through this, I imagine it as a tunnel, and they have to go through this tunnel, which is filled to the brim with these mals, and they have to try to come out alive. So she actually very much needs allies. And the best way to get allies is to join an enclave. An enclave is a group that exists in the real world. For example, you have the London enclave or the New York enclave, and certain families are already in that enclave. But during your days at the Scholomance, it is possible to form alliances by bribing your way in, or to give certain favors to kids that already are in an enclave. So the best way to make sure that you survive graduation is to join an enclave group, so you have a larger group to get through that tunnel. But Elle doesn't really like that system. Since she has grown up outside of an enclave, she doesn't really feel like it is fair that the enclaves actually have an advantage, because within the enclave a lot of mana is being pooled together, so they work together, and all the people from the enclave can dip into that mana, while she has to work for her own mana herself. So she feels that the enclave kids are having an easier time than the kids that are not in an enclave. And she's particularly frustrated by this boy named Orion. Orion is in the New York enclave, and he is saving everyone at school, by which I mean that a lot of these mals, a lot of these creatures tend to attack students all the time during the year. They can hide everywhere, in books, in shadows, in the classroom, in the ceiling. So she has to be very careful all the time as not to get attacked. And Orion has a tendency to save everyone. And by killing these smaller moths, the moths in the tunnel for graduation are getting more and more hungry, which is actually threatening the system of the school because they are getting too hungry to wait until graduation. Now some fair warning about this first book. The first 2 chapters, and I have to tell you the chapters are long in this book. If you prefer shorter chapters, that is not what you will be getting. But the first 2 chapters in particular in this book are really dense. They are completely filled with world building. It moves really fast and they are using words of which you don't know the meaning yet. So at the beginning of this book, each time that I reached the end of a page, I had to reread the page because I felt that I was missing out on things or that I didn't really comprehend everything. And it gave me kind of a bad feeling. And I was actually very close to DNFing this book. And I'm really glad that I persevered, so I have to tell you that please continue reading, even though it is very hard in the beginning and it moves really slow and it gets you down a bit. After a while you get into it, you start to understand how everything functions and you even start to appreciate the way that this book is written. So right now I'm at page 248 and I will give you an update when I finish the book. Okay, so I finished A Deadly Education last night and I really enjoyed the last part of the book. It had some really cinematic fighting scenes. It had humor, which I could really appreciate. It even ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, which gets me excited because I get to read the next book right away. I don't have to wait. So although this book started really slow for me and actually it took me quite a while to get into it, it ended on a high. So I would really recommend you to read this book if you are into a bit of darker fantasy and if you don't mind a lot of world building and a lot of facts and figures, I would say. Because once the story gets moving, it's actually really good. So I'm looking forward to the next book, which is The Last Graduate, and I'll see you later. I'm at page 154. And in this book, Elle is in her last year of the Scholomance, so she is a senior. And she is heading towards that graduation, which will be pretty painful. But the school seems to be against her from the start of this new year. She gets this very bad timetable in which she has some really heavy classes that she has to take. And she has this Wednesday afternoon where she is stuck in a classroom with all freshmen, which is not normal. Normally there are always some seniors that are together, but she ends up in this classroom and having to defend these freshmen from mals that keep coming in. And these mals only seem to be attacking her. No one else in the school has any trouble with mals this year. And she feels very annoyed. She usually feels very annoyed. But now she feels especially annoyed because she feels like she has to defend these freshmen, which she doesn't feel like doing, because normally when you save someone or when you help someone, it's a quid pro quo thing. So they should be able to give you some kind of advantage or something in return, which these freshmen cannot. So in the beginning of this book, you are mainly trying to figure out why the school has it in for Elle now. And Elle has to try and prepare for graduation. But she has a difficult time because she has to spend her mana saving these children while she is trying to save her mana to get through the graduation hall, through that tunnel that I spoke about earlier. So far, I'm quite enjoying the book, but I think mainly because I just came off reading the first one. I think if I had read the first one a while ago, it would be a lot harder to get into this one again. Not just because you would have to acquaint yourself with the world again, but also because it is moving kind of slow in comparison, especially in comparison to the ending of the last book. So I'll have to see if this continues for the rest of the book. Hopefully it picks up a little bit. Right, so I'm done with The Last Graduate, and since the last time I updated you guys, the tone of the book shifted. So that first 100-page storyline just kind of goes away, and then a new one starts. And during the first book and the first part of this book, it has always been about getting allies. Elle has to gain allies in order to survive graduation. Otherwise she wouldn't be strong enough, or she wouldn't be able to survive all the males that are living in the graduation hall. And now we make a total 180, because now Elle, due to circumstances, is totally overpowered, and actually she is the only one who can make sure that people get out safe. They have to work on this obstacle course, which is supposed to train everyone for that graduation day and make their alliances figure out how to survive and get through. But the mals on this obstacle course are normally a representation of how difficult the mals will be that they would be facing. And the mals that are appearing now are just too difficult to beat, except if you are working together with Elle. So this makes this whole book take turn, and the whole workings and the whole way that people are normally working together, and the whole enclave system, and it changes everything up quite a bit. But it was actually quite boring to read, and more often than not you feel like you're being whacked over the head with an encyclopedia, because you keep getting information and information and information, and it drags. And maybe that's just me, because I did hear positive reviews about this book, and maybe I was not reading it at the right moment in my life. I had to put it down quite often and then pick it up again. But this is quite a difficult book to pick up again and get your mind into again. So if I had had the ability to read larger chunks at a time, maybe that would have been better. But it didn't work for me. It was going slow, it was not entertaining me. But then we reached the last 50 pages or so, and finally there is some Orion. I'm not going to spoil what that is about, but finally. And the big end game is absolutely fantastic. Once again, very cinematic, very spectacular, everything that you want it to be. And once again, right at the very end, we have a cliffhanger, and that works for me. And so the ending did not quite redeem the whole of this book, but just a little bit. However, now comes the third book in the series, which is called The Golden Enclaves. I'm not actually looking forward to reading this one, because I didn't particularly like the second book, and because now we are leaving the Scholomance. So up until now, the two books have taken place at a school, at the Scholomance, and it is like The Hunger Games, Harry Potter, The Maze Runner, what have you, which all have sort of a particular setting in the first few books. And then you have the last book, which opens up the world, and that is what this one is going to be. I feel like in this last book we are going to get a lot of information once again, but about the outside world. And I feel like I've had enough. It is starting to feel like studying, and I'm just going to miss this space that I already know about. Because if the third book would happen at the Scholomance too, at least you would have already had that knowledge, and there would be room for more story in the book. And now I'm just afraid that once again it is going to be 80% information dump and 20% storyline. So I kind of have to motivate myself to start reading this one, and I hope I can continue it in good time. And who knows, maybe I'm in luck and it will surprise me. Well, you will know in a few moments. Time for a quick update on the Golden Enclaves. I was not looking forward to reading this book, as I've told you before. And in the beginning of this book, it starts with Elle dealing with the fallout of what happened at the end of book 2, which is of course to be expected, but which does not make for a very interesting introduction to this first book, although we have to go through that. So in the first two books, whenever Elle thinks about her future, when she dares to think about her future, she talks about creating these small enclaves for people who do not belong to an enclave, so they can be safe too. So that's her vision of her future. And I thought this book would be about that, and in my head I saw this as this whole dune-esque landscape. I think I saw it like Elle going into deserts or deserted spaces and creating something similar to water sources for people who do not have water, something like that. And it seemed quite boring in my head. But actually in this book we do get to travel a lot, but it is very, very interesting. So far we have had 2 rescue missions, and they have been very interesting to follow. This book is growing on me with every page that I'm reading, so I'm very, very happy about that. And I have read mixed reviews about this book, so it's surprising to me that for me this is turning out to be better than the second book. So far. But now I have just passed page 270 and there is a huge, very huge reveal, which was quite mind-blowing to read. And I think that I have figured out the plot. So that is why I wanted to check in now, so I would be able to confirm that, because so far it is not mentioned. What I'm thinking is not mentioned in here, and I cannot tell you what I am thinking because I do not want to spoil anything. But it has to do with the revelation on page 270, and it has to do something with the villain, or the supposed villain. So now I'm actually looking forward to reading the rest of this book, and I'll see you again when I'm done. I knew it, I'm right. And here we are, that quickly. The ending of this book was something I was looking forward to, because in the first 2 books, I'll call it battle at the end, is quite impressive, and it always boosted up the book a bit for me at the ending. But this time, I was expecting quite a lot, because Naomi Novik was doing this so well in the previous 2 books, and this time it wasn't just gonna be the students of the Scholomance, but it was going to be the whole world. And there is a battle, but it kind of fell short for me. It was not the massive thing that I was expecting it to be, and that kind of disappointed me. However, I was glad about the ending. Everything comes together, sort of. And we aren't stuck with any loose threads, anything that still needs to be resolved or something like that. We do get an answer to all the questions that we might have had. And therefore, I actually do end up liking this book better than the second one, but maybe not as much as the first one. And to wrap up the whole series, I'd say that it is worth to read. You should consider reading them when you have some time on your hands to read, because putting them down and just picking them up again whenever you please, it will be hard for this particular series, because there is so much information and so many things going on. But I enjoyed the humor, especially the sarcastic humor that was in these books. I enjoyed the magic system, and I also appreciated how clever these books were. Naomi Novik definitely has thought out her world and thought about everything that was going on in it. And I also like that there is a bit more to this than just a magic story. It really goes into the class system and what people are willing to do in order to achieve certain goals. And that gave these books some more substance. So if you got to the end of this very long video, I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you soon in another one. Bye!